Hello and welcome to Recovery Stories Have Power. My name is Oliver Books. This is the second episode in a series of video podcasts we filmed at the Faces and Voices of Recovery's annual Recovery Leadership Summit in Denver, Colorado. On today's episode, I sit down with Dr. Hernandez. Aner is a veteran of the health and human services field, having worked in this space for over 36 years. In our conversation, we dive into the past, from coming to America during the Civil Rights Movement, becoming incarcerated, and then going on to higher education and working in the health field. We examine how these experiences and the communities that have woven them together continue to inform the work that Aner has been doing in the field. And now, for my conversation with Dr. Aner Hernández.
So thank you, Aner, for joining us. This is Recovery Stories Have Power. Can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do?
Yes, and I'll start with thanking you for the invite. I love the name in terms of centering power and stories, that sort of thing. My name is Hernández, and I am from Puerto Rico. I live in Massachusetts. I come from a big family. We were 10 brothers and sisters, and so a big family and growing. I have worked in the field of health and human services for 36 years and a half. We are in June, so that makes it half. In primarily not-for-profit settings, centering equity, centering the elimination of disparities has been the focus of my work. And I started off in the mid-'80s. And so a lot of our folks were dying of AIDS and getting infected with HIV. And so I was working with young people way back when in Boston doing that work. And ever since, I've worked in community-based settings, and I've done a bunch of work in mental health and substance use disorders. And I am a person who works across the continuum. So I am a certified prevention specialist. I'm certified and licensed as an addictions counselor at the reciprocal level. And I work across the continuum, so prevention, intervention, the multiple pathways of recovery, which include treatment and recovery supports. And in Massachusetts, I am chief of public health at a local community-based organization where we do a number of things around substance use and mental health and HIV and hepatitis C and other structural determinants of health. And then at the federal level, I work as a consultant on a number of federally funded initiatives, including the Addiction Technology Transfer Centers, the Mental Health Technology Transfer Centers, and the Prevention Technology Transfer Centers. And I'm on the board of directors of Faces and Voices. And it pleases me to be around people of like mind. So that's a little bit about my work, me, who I am, that sort of thing. And I would be remiss if I don't add this piece of it. I have a PhD and I have a GED, and my GED I got in prison. And it was more challenging to get a GED in prison than a PhD out here. I am a person in long-term recovery, which for me is defined as I don't have to go back to prison. I don't have to be living in conditions that are really challenging for many people who are out and still using. And my family doesn't need to continue to be impacted by that, right? So it's 37 and a half years of being in recovery. And I didn't think I would live to see 18. And here I am decades later, and I get to learn from people who are committed to helping other folks, right?
Yeah.
So that's a little bit about me and where I come from. and I'm a lifelong learner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That much seems so clear to me. So what jumped into my head was, is there anything that you don't do? That's an amazing list, and it's you're a force in our community. I know a little bit about your story. So you mentioned that you didn't think that you would live to see 18. From what I know, you moved here in a time of pretty intense social upheaval. And how did that impact you in terms of leading to your recovery and leading to the work that you do?
So, thank you for the question. In 1968, we arrived in Springfield, Massachusetts. The context within that time era, it's civil rights movement. We came to live, well, my mom brought us to the U.S., no luggage, no money, an address of a friend that she had. And we came to a neighborhood, the north end of Springfield, and the people who lived there, primarily whites, the vast majority, I would say over 99% white, didn't want us there. And the communities were being forced to confront immigration and migration, and also the experiences of Black and brown people. And so we came at a time where there was a curfew, the National Guard was out, the police were out in riot gear, German Shepherds, riots, all of that stuff, right? And so I was about to be 5 years old. And so you come into that and you can't make sense of it. Sure. But you do know that family is family, familia is familia, and you do know that there's some people who don't appreciate you, don't want you there, and you're trying to understand why. I became an interpreter at the age of 5 because I learned English through Sesame Street and TV very quickly.
Sure.
And so my mom didn't speak English, didn't understand English, but we needed to go places for services and that sort of thing. So there I was, 5-year-old boy. I would have to translate the things that were being said towards my mom and towards my family, which weren't nice things.
Sure.
And then my mom, strongest person in the world for me, who does that, moves to a different country, doesn't understand the language, and arrives with nothing. And she was strong in many different ways. And so she didn't take crap from anybody. So they said things, I needed to figure out what to translate, what not to translate, because I'm in front of my mom.
Sure.
But she knew with body language that some of the stuff was not nice. And then she said some things that I need to translate and be careful what to translate because it was dangerous, right?
Of course.
And so how does that connect to my work? Now, well, I learned advocacy. I learned translation. I learned how to read body language. I learned what to say, what not to say, right? And so that was the introduction into U.S. society, right? And experiencing discrimination and that sort of thing.
Sure.
I went to school in the U.S. I had never gone to school in Puerto Rico, but I went to school here. And it was an interesting experience because there were some teachers, all the teachers were white. There was a couple of teachers who were really nice, who humanized kids, worked with kids. I will never forget Miss Burke in the first grade who would take us swimming. She had a yellow Volkswagen. She would meet my mom, do all of that. But there were teachers who were really mean. And I moved my hands when I talk a lot, and they would make me sit on my hands for hours. And the things that we heard were very difficult for kids to hear from adults who are responsible for educating people.
Right.
And so again, there I learned that we were not welcomed. And as a kid, as I learned more and I grew and I went to, elementary school, I also learned that what we were being taught about ourselves was not true. Because the history books and the way that they would talk about people of color and the way that they would not even mention us as Hispanics, as Latinos, as Latinx people wasn't there either. So I wasn't, not that I wasn't into education, but I knew that there was something wrong with that. As a kid, I knew,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
I never laid my hand on my chest, pledged the allegiance. I never recited that because I knew that outside of the school, they were killing black and brown people and that the National Guard was out. And so why would I pledge allegiance to a flag in a place that I was treated indifferently? And so that did some things to me, right? And did some things to me as it relates to education. And I had good grades.
Sure.
I had good grades. It was just my experience with a system that wasn't responsive to the needs of our communities. And so at some point, I tried drugs. And so when I say drugs, I'm going to be more specific. At the age of 7, I tried alcohol, right? And so how does a 7-year-old kid get their hands on alcohol? At a party, at a house party,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Kids in many of those situations is take this beer to uncle, take this drink to auntie, take this, right? And you experience people working all week and struggling really hard, all of that. But on that occasion, people are dancing and they're smiling and they're drinking, and you associate
Right.
that with something positive. So at one of those points, I took a swig of that, and so that too changed me, right? And at around 7 years old, I took a puff from a cigarette, right? That's another drug. So those are introductions to those things that change us in profound ways.
Yeah.
And so as a young Puerto Rican boy, I was trying to find my identity in a place that told me that my identity didn't matter and who I was didn't matter.
Yeah.
And so I turned to harder drugs at a very young age in middle school and those sorts of things. And it was very challenging, particularly for my mom, who brought us to this country to make it, to progress. And here I was involved in things that were setbacks for sure, and disappointments to her. But I was a boy. I didn't have an orientation around things that I understand today. And all of that experience informs who I am and what I do and why I do what I do, right?
Of course.
It very much does that for me.
Yeah. Yeah. As you were telling your story, what I think is amazing, specifically about substance use and recovery, is as a person in recovery myself, decades after this, our circumstances are entirely different, and some of the feelings that you were described hit as close to home as just about anything else. And I think that's it. Some of those feelings are painful, but that level of connection between recovering people is kind of magic. It really, we're at RLS right now, Recovery Leadership Summit right now. And I mean, I'm sure you've had a similar experience in just talking with people who are so enthusiastic about connecting and community. It's so, coming from such a divisive background, you were talking about schools and how your identity was not supported, and then turning to alcohol and other drugs, where those, kind of infer that those communities were communities that were supporting your identity. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah. So, right within the small Latino Puerto Rican community, Massachusetts, the Northeast, the majority of people at the time and still are Puerto Rican, right, from Latin America.
Yeah.
And so those communities were tight knit, still are,
Yeah.
and small, and that was supportive. The environment in communities different, right? Because that environment, again, the context was riots and civil war, civil rights, and all of that, and in schools where, young kids of color were not and still are not treated right. But at home, supportive families, supportive neighbors, right, supportive community, that sort of thing. But it's just challenging to wrap one's head around that. And so you talk about, connection, which is the opposite of addiction, right? It's not recovery, it's connection. Yeah. And so today I have the privilege of traveling to many parts of the world and many parts of the country, and to come to conferences, to meetings, and meet people that I've never met.
Right.
And the connection is instant because we have a lot of things in common. And just by hearing people and hearing their stories and what they do and why they do what they do, for me is extremely humbling because I pinch myself, really. They pay me to do this. They pay me to do this type of work. Because I know people right now who are working in factories and jobs that they are not appreciated. They are paid pennies. They are not supported. They hate their jobs and they're treated badly.
Yeah.
But still they go every single day. And for me, I get to come and do this.
Yeah.
And I get to come and be with people who want the best for me and I want the best for them.
Yeah.
And these are folks that I've never met.
Yeah.
And the beauty in that, right? And we build community in doing that, right? And then there's many people who I know, who I have developed a relationship throughout these processes, that those are beautiful relationships.
Yeah.
That I can say today that I have people that I love, that I trust, and they come in every shape and form. I started off by saying that my experiences with not all, but with some white people were not the best in society. And there have been countless white people who have demonstrated that that's not every single white person.
Sure.
Right? That's not every single person who fits in this box is like that. That's community. That's love. That's empathy. That's sharing. And we might not have the same experiences, but we have similar experiences and we have similar goals and aspirations.
Yeah.
That's beauty for me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Honestly, you get that feeling in your chest when you talk about that level of connection. It's a beautiful thing. Earlier, in your keynote, you were talking about going a little off script here, if I hope you don't mind. Earlier in your keynote, you were talking about the difference between allyship and collaborators, and I was incredibly moved by that. I was first introduced to that concept through a book called Hood Feminism, but it makes so much sense to me that there cannot be a time limit or a time off to working to make our communities stronger in that way. Can you elaborate on what your feelings towards that are?
So, I've met many people, as I said before, with very good intentions of wanting to help.
Sure.
So the first thing where I land with that is communities that are struggling with disproportionate impacts on substance use and poverty and experiencing homelessness, all of those things. We don't need to be saved. We don't need saviors. We don't need people to come in and, wag fingers and say, I'm here to save you, pat themselves on the back. We don't need that. Communities that have been marginalized and racialized and treated badly, we have ideas, we have solutions, we have strengths, we have resiliency, we have survived and resisted systems of oppression, all of that. And so what we seek are true partnerships with people who understand that the way that you begin a relationship is by demonstrating respect and earning respect, because that's not a given. Yeah. And so it's the equivalent of me coming to your house and stepping into your space, into your place, and immediately telling you, here's what's wrong with you, and here's what you have to do, and this is the way that you have to do it. No one wants that, regardless. No one wants that, right? And so what do we seek? We seek respect. We seek validation. We seek partnership, and that is different. And so when I talk about we don't need allies, because allies are self-appointed. You don't invite people in. People, for the most part, people don't say, can I be your ally? No, they say, well, I'm your ally. Well, there you have it. I don't even know what that means, and you're self-appointing yourself as an ally. And I do know what allyship means, but I don't know what that means to you in relationship to me and my community. So what I said in the keynote this morning is we need co-defendants and we need co-conspirators, people who are committed to go above and beyond the 9 to 5, the 8 to 4, the working hours of, when I'm being paid to do this, and who have a commitment to truly support people in different ways. And it's not just verbal, and it's not, again, it's 5 o'clock and I have to go because I have my little thing that I need to go to, and it's convenient for me to turn it off and turn it on because I come from that place of privilege.
Right.
No, that's not what communities need. That's not what individuals need. And I understand that because I too have a lot of privilege.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
I'm male in this society. I have advanced and terminal degrees, a PhD. I have a job, a retirement account. I have a home. I have a car. I have a refrigerator. I have a closet with a whole bunch of stuff in it that I don't use and that I don't need. And so I carry a lot of privilege. So when I go into communities, regardless of what those communities are, I need to be aware of my privilege, and I need to keep that stuff in check, and I need to check myself not to come in with all of the answers, with all of the directives. I need to come in leading with cultural humility, which implies that we need to learn about ourselves, our biases, our judgments, ways of doing things, and we need to keep those things in check so that we don't hurt people. And many times people with good intentions hurt other people.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that's the approach. For me, it's grounded in that. And I am forever pushed to go back to that by mentors, by the people that I meet, by people in community, because I'm not professing here to know everything there is to know about that. Right. But I do have good mentors who push me in that direction and who say, Hanel, these things are important. You need to pay attention to them. I'll give you a quick example of this. I'm a person in long-term recovery. So I come in contact, I would come in contact with people needing or seeking recovery or needing services. And one of the first things that I used to say to people is, I'm just like you. I went to prison. I did drugs. You and I are the same. We come from the same community, blah, blah, blah. And people would look a certain type of way when I said that.
Sure.
I developed relationships with people, and I will never forget the first time that a young man said, "Can I say something to you?" After he had a little bit more trust in me.
Yeah.
And I said, "Yeah, go ahead." He says, "You know, when you told me that we're the same, you know what I thought about you? Is that you're full of shit." And I said, "What do you mean?" I was taken a little bit back,
Sure,
right? Because someone
sure.
says that.
Right.
I said, "What do you mean by that?" And he said, "Dude, I wish I only had 25% of what you have. We're not
Yeah.
the same.
Yeah.
I'm living on the street.
Mm-hmm.
I have track marks. You used to have track marks, but no longer. You have a place to live. I don't. I'm hungry, and you're not." And you see how that has the potential to waking some people up. And for me, it was, I don't need to tell people that we're the same, because we're not. What I need to understand is that we have some things that are relatable,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And I need to be careful with my privilege, imposing it on other people with those types of statements that are not true.
Sure.
They're not. Now, this young man was Puerto Rican, and I'm Puerto Rican, and I was younger than what I am now, but I understood what he was telling me.
Yeah.
I understood what he was telling me, and I understand it better as every day goes by.
Sure.
And so today, I seek to understand and to relate, not to tell people, "Oh no, we're the same."
Sure. Sure.
And the interest there is to connect, right? Because that's what I was trying to do.
Right, right.
It was good intentions, but
Yes.
good intentions, you need to have above and beyond just good intentions.
The road to hell is paved with those.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Absolutely. That's I think the humility aspect to connecting with people and creating communities is, I mean, it's life-saving, right? Like to find, and that was a really wonderful example, just to find that connection point while also acknowledging that like every single individual is an individual. A community that I am a part of online has a saying, it's called Partners in Health. They have a saying that they do work out of country, and the folks that were there, boots on the ground, building this, it's a hospital in Sierra Leone. They said when it was just getting started, they said, don't come, stay. And I think that through line, building community isn't showing up occasionally. It's stay. Yeah.
Co-conspirators and co-defendants,
Yes.
as opposed to I come and I do this little thing that makes me feel good, and I leave, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot to connection. Listen, I go from prison to treatment, not because I want to go to treatment, but because I want to get out of jail. So and of all people, the person who helped me get there, Sister Margaret Gibbons, an ex-nun, MSW, chain smoking.
Yeah.
And I told my lawyer, "Hey, I have a drug problem." Because I have heard in the prison block that if you say that, they'll send you to treatment. Not because I believed I had a problem, but because I want to get out.
Right, of course.
So she introduces me to Casa Don Pedro Albizu Campos. That is the name of a Puerto Rican nationalist who did about 25 years in U.S. prisons for advocating for the independence of Puerto Rico. The house was named after him. He's a social justice icon in our communities. Went to Harvard in 2017, spoke 8 different languages, and was a huge brain, and struggled for liberation of people throughout Latin America and in Puerto Rico. At any rate, Sister Margaret introduces me to that place. And so 40 Latino men in that treatment facility. Everyone who worked there, Latino males. All but one of the staff were all people in recovery. And so I arrived there, and I didn't trust anybody. I come from prison, and if you're nice to me, it means you want something from me,
Right.
right? and they humanized me. They treated me with dignity and respect, and I didn't trust any one of them. You go into and they still persisted in terms of saying, no, you're not that. We don't see you as that person in that box that the system sees you in. You're one of ours, and we love you. Again, I don't trust that.
Sure.
Right? Because I come from a place that doesn't teach you, that if a male hugs you, it means something different.
Sure.
And so when you're in treatment, you're supposed to talk about your feelings. Well, I come from jail. You talk about your feelings, that gets you hurt.
Sure.
If you're in a treatment program, they say, if you see someone using drugs, you have to speak up and say something because that's going to get people in trouble. And I'm not ratting people out.
Speaking up is what gets me in trouble.
Yeah, exactly. What, are you crazy? I'm not going to rat anybody out.
For sure.
If I see anybody doing drugs, I'm going to want to do it with them. Again, it wasn't there for a different reason.
Yeah.
And then I went to group, and they said, talk about your feelings. So they taught me how to be a man, a Puerto Rican man in society, that we are full human beings. They believed in me more than what I believed in myself. Carl Rogers calls that unconditional positive regard. He put it to writing, but that exists within communities.
Yeah.
Mothers believe in us more than what we believe in ourselves. I think that they are the experts in unconditional positive regard, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Females and mothers, that sort of thing. So they taught me to believe in myself, but they had to believe in me before I could believe in myself. And they had to teach me what it means to be a male in this society.
Sure.
From the correct perspective, not from this perspective of arrogance and machismo and getting over and being proud of things that we should not be proud of. Like I was proud to go to prison.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, they taught me that there's a better way. And they introduced me to this thing called recovery.
Yeah.
Even when I didn't want anything to do with it, right?
Isn't that the truth? Yeah.
And so I am forever grateful to those men who taught me that, and who brought my family into that process. Right. Because this piece on substance use disorders, what some people call addiction, it impacts the entire family. And what I did impacted my entire family. So I'm grateful for all of those connections, you see?
Yeah.
So when you talk about connections, you make me think about how I got into that space.
Yeah, it's I mean, your story is it's inspiring. I'm just gonna lay it all out there. I feel that coming from a place of community and then weaving connections together to build the life that you've been able to lead and to become the leader that you've been able to be. I think there's a lot to be said. There's a lot to be said for having this through line of humility and recovery, and like clearly you're doing this because you want to continue to be a learner, as you said earlier. So amidst all of this, I am curious how being justice impacted has affected both your introduction to some of this work and maybe your continued education, as well as post-education. How have you been able to leverage that into creating less stigma, less barriers for your communities in that way?
So thank you for the question. There's no way for me to talk about substance use disorders or mental health without talking about these carceral systems that were designed to impact people in very negative ways, right? And so in the keynote this morning, I talked about the fact that in the U.S. we have a criminal injustice approach to a public health issue. And that system touches the majority of people with a substance use and mental health Right? We have the largest prison population per capita in the world, 2.3 million people thereabouts.
Right.
We release about 7 million people from county jails every year, about 600,000 from state and federal prisons with very little to no supports, right? And so I think it is irresponsible for anybody in this field to talk about recovery and recovery issues without attending to the impact of those criminal injustice systems on our folk.
Yeah.
We have 70 million people in the country with a criminal offender record.
Yeah.
And we have policies that sustain all of that system.
Right.
And we have hundreds of billions of dollars that are extracted from the misery of people who are trapped and enslaved within those systems. And so I know this because I experienced it firsthand. I first was arrested when I was 11. And so from juvenile facilities to adult facilities, right, to all of that, I know what that looks like within those spaces and places. And then I have family, I have friends, I live in communities. I have not moved out of my community. I live where I grew up. I have family who has died because of those inhumane conditions, and friends and people that I don't know that I also care about, right? Because that system is designed to impact poor people in very specific ways. So my learning of that firsthand comes from that lived and living experience.
Yes.
My additional learning comes from understanding what the data says, what policy says, what research says about these systems. And people can get upset at me because of what I say, but tell me that 2.3 million people incarcerated is the wrong number. Tell me that we don't have the largest prison population per capita in the world. Can't argue with me on that. You can if you want to, but it won't make sense.
Yeah, numbers don't lie.
Right?
Yeah.
That it disproportionately impacts Native people, Black, African American people, Hispanic, Latino, Latina people. Those data are clear.
Yeah.
And so my introduction into the world of academia, it is not the same as most people who go to colleges and universities. I didn't drop out of high school. I was pushed out of middle school. So for me, deciding to go back to school, what does go back to school mean when you, right? When you didn't have any of that experience.
Right.
I can't talk about high school graduation celebrations because I never went to that.
Sure.
Right? Or, you know, these things that were people reunions, is what they're called.
Yeah.
Can't go to that.
Yeah.
I never experienced that. But here's what I did have. I had good mentors who said, you should give yourself an opportunity. You have what it takes. Again, we believe in you more than what you believe in yourself.
Yeah.
And I worked in our field for 10 years with a GED. And I know what that feels like because many people with advanced degrees and college degrees in meetings and in the work, they'll let you know that they have their degree. They'll put it in a way that's subtle, but it's very direct.
Sure.
And so I used to hear this a lot. So let me answer that for you because I have a master's degree. Let me answer that because in my world of having a PhD, and I would go, I know exactly what you're doing.
Sure.
Right? Because I was sitting there working in the field for 10 years with my GED, and that made me feel a certain type of way as being inadequate. And I knew that I wasn't inadequate, but that system is designed to do that. So I could have taken that and done nothing about it. And my mentor said, well, what are you going to do about it? And I said, well, I need to do something different. So I gave myself that opportunity. And with good mentors and with good teachers and instructors, I learned the language of research, the language of data, the language of all of this stuff. And if when we enter into those places, we can focus our attention to what is our passion. And so for me, that had to do with mental health, with substance use disorders, with lived and living experience, and with this piece on incarceration. So my work is informed by that, right? The programs that I oversee are informed by the fact that the people that we serve, many have been institutionalized by those systems.
Right.
And so the focus for many programs is on the drugs. Stop doing the drugs and, be drug free, this and that, this. But that's one of the most easiest things to do, is to stop using substances. It's to live life after that.
Yes.
To live a productive life in recovery. And what does that look like for people who have been in that system?
Yeah.
I was speaking to a guy that I know who just got out and did 38 years.
Yeah.
He's my age. He did 38 years.
Yeah.
Going into the shower with flip-flops still.
Sure. Yeah.
Washing his underwear by hand in the shower still.
Yeah.
Doesn't know how to use a cell phone.
Right.
Cannot interact with large groups of people.
Yeah.
He needs to exercise at a certain time of day, eat at a certain time of day. He doesn't trust most people, if not all. All of those things.
Right.
Is he doing drugs? No. He was actually helping people behind the wall to stay drug free while he was in there.
Wow.
So he comes out. And what is the measure? Oh, you're not doing substances, so you're good. You have a job, so you're good. But we don't see behind what's happening with people. Right. That is institutionalization. We have to work with people so that they fully integrate back into society.
Sure.
As much as possible.
Yeah.
I still don't trust most people.
Yeah.
I still don't sit with my back to the door. I still question why people are being nice to me, because that experience of being in carceral systems, that lives with you forever, that you're not going to get rid of that. You need to learn how to live with that and manage it as much as possible. But that'll impact every single thing about you, including relationships with other people, including your integration into community, where you work, where you're not allowed to work, what you are able to say, where you're not able to say. I'm 59 years old, man. I've been around for a minute. And so if you notice within my keynote, I'm not real worried about what people think about what I say. But that's me. And I have privilege and power. That's not everybody. Right? Our folks are, people in early recovery are coming out of those systems. They cannot. So for me, to your question, we have to combine living experience, research, data, and outcomes.
Yeah.
That puts us in a different position.
Yeah.
So when I am in front of people now and I introduce myself, I always do the same thing. I have a PhD and I got a GED in prison.
Yeah.
And you know what that does to the people in the room who don't have academic experience? They come up to me and say, thank you for saying that, because I've never heard anyone say that. People stay in that space. And then what I've gotten from some people, not all, but from some people who have advanced degrees, why would you say that? People are going to look at you in a certain way. I say, why would I not? I am responsible for doing that.
Yes.
That is exactly why I do it. It is to humanize people.
Yeah.
It is for people to understand that that experience didn't break me.
Right.
And it doesn't have to break you either, right? That's my responsibility.
Yeah.
Not to sit here and go, yeah.
Sure.
What the hell is that all about?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's selfish. My mom taught me better.
Yeah. I love that. And that's too, that just reaching across that divide. Again, leaning back into your keynote, you said that there's not cracks in the system. There's giant gaping holes. And I feel like saying that I got a GED in prison while talking about your doctorate or advanced degree is that's literally building a bridge for someone who can hear that. Yeah, that's I think, and doing it in a way that is leading with humility, knowing that your privilege allows you to be in that position. So balancing this addiction and substance use disorder and being justice impacted. And we talk a lot about like recovery capital here, and in your story of the person that you knew still having all of these like what sound to be trauma responses from a traumatic carceral experience. How do you think like some things like more strength-based approaches can help build people up through this? What does that look like to you?
So strength-based, right?
Yeah.
And people who are out to save other people. So I just presented a person to you that is struggling with this, and this, right? Because of institutionalization. But here's what I see in him, and this is what I expressed to him. You survived 38 years in prison, brother. Who amongst us can do that? Some people wouldn't last a day.
Yeah.
He survived years in solitary confinement. That's a prison within a prison.
Right.
That is a strength. While he was in there, he found a way to help other inmates who were leaving.
Yeah.
And by the way, he was let out at 38 years because he was found not guilty of what? Proven that it wasn't him.
Yeah.
Right? The strength to be able to come out and to say, I'm out and I want to continue to help other people. That is a strength.
Yeah.
His ability to speak English and Spanish, that's a strength. His ability to articulate what's going on, that is a strength. When we talk about recovery capital, internal recovery capital, all of those things that I just rattled off are resiliency, his ability to advocate for himself, for others, to be present for his family, all of that stuff, that is recovery capital. Not that I taught him, but that he developed.
Yes.
And we, if we're truly interested in being strength-based, we need to lead with that, the validation of that.
Yes.
Right? Is there recovery capital that he didn't have when he got out? Well, of course. Place to live that's recovery conducive, health insurance, a license, right? Those sorts of things that enable you, right, to do an income, right? All of those things. Where that's our role in supporting someone who needs that. And what do our systems look like that are built to understand someone who comes from that experience, right?
Yeah.
And creating a space at the table, because I don't do anything for anybody. I do things with people. My mentors taught me that. They didn't teach me, they didn't do advocacy on me. They did advocacy with me. The reason why I know how to do it is because of that stance. And when I tried, and I did multiple occasions, to thank them and that they were the best and I was appreciative, you know what they said? Stop.
Yeah.
I was here when you were ready. I've learned from you. You've taught me. You've taught us a great deal. And if you want to be appreciative, give it away.
Yes.
Pay it forward. Pay it forward. We have a responsibility to do that. That is somewhat in vogue now, but I'm talking 30 years ago, they were talking this language. And so I am not lucky because luck doesn't exist.
Yeah.
That is a myth. I am fortunate that I met good people like Sister Margaret Gibbons, like Alberto Barreto, like Jose del Valle, and other folks who humanized me and brought me in and taught me this stuff. And for my mom, right, who taught me, we got here with nothing. And when we were established here, she made sure that other families who came had a place to stay, that when there was food, everybody ate or nobody ate. Right? The focus on the collective, not in this individualized crap. And so to be strength-based is to see the good in people.
Yes.
Yeah. And the most broken person that we come across, they have a lot of good qualities. These are human beings. We've been taught to dehumanize them. And in the process, we dehumanize ourselves. And so I am in the process of always wrestling back my humanity. And that takes work on a daily basis because the system tells us that some people are worthy and some people are not.
Right.
Those folks who are coming out of those situations, the level of strength, the level of commitment, and then as soon as they enter into our space, I hear them all the time, I want to give back.
Yeah.
What is that about? That is about purpose.
Yes.
That is about purpose and a commitment to do something for other people. Isn't that a beautiful thing?
And it is. And this anecdotally, like speaking from my own lived experience, like that is the purpose. That's the thing that drives you is figuring out how you can give the gift that was so freely given. I love that.
Exactly, right? That's a beautiful feeling.
Yeah.
Again, at the end of the day, I pinch myself. Really, I get paid to do this?
Right.
I would do this regardless.
I swear.
Regardless,
Yeah,
right? I would do this regardless. This isn't work for me.
Yeah.
And so people call me on the weekend or during off working hours. I'm like, oh, no, it's after 5. I can't. No.
Yeah.
No.
Right.
Substance use disorders, addiction doesn't
stop.
It doesn't start at 8 to 4 or 9 to 5, right?
Absolutely.
It's 247. Our recovery is 247.
Yeah.
Now, we need to take care of ourselves, right? Because if not, we can't be there for other people unless we are, right, taking care of ourselves. And that's a huge piece.
Of course.
Right? We many times call it self-care. We have a responsibility to take care of ourselves emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, physically, all of those things, so that we can be present for other people, right? And that we can be present for ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Because if not, then what happens? Things fall apart.
Yeah.
Right? I have experienced the stress of this work because this work is very rewarding.
Yeah.
But this work is not my recovery.
Yes.
My recovery pathway is my recovery pathway. This work demands attention and it is stressful in many ways because we hear the traumatic experiences and we view those experiences on a daily basis with other people. And so we need to understand that this is not our recovery. And why do I say that? Over the years, I have worked with people and even supervised people who are no longer with us because they thought that their work is their recovery.
Sure.
And this work, this job, puts you at greater risk for reoccurrence.
Sure.
Because of the stress, because of the trauma, because of our own experiences. So I need to be involved in my recovery pathway, fully engaged, right? And make time for that as I learn from and be a part of other people's lives. Because if not, I can't be there for other people.
Yeah.
Right?
100%.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as we are approaching time, I have 2 more questions for you.
Go ahead.
One, what's something in your work right now that you're really looking forward to? What are you excited about?
Well, I'm really excited about young people. I started this work in my 20s and I'm 59. And I see young people like you, even younger people in their 20s and teens and those folks are really excited, enthusiastic. They can do my job better than I can. And that is not a threat to me.
Right.
I am in awe of the way that young people use technologies, of the way that they think outside the box, of how young people even see race, racism, ethnicity, gender identity. Yeah. They're not caught up by and large. Like people of my generation were and still are. And so that for me, it's hopeful.
Yeah.
because I am on my way out, and I am excited that I get to work with young people who bring that level of enthusiasm, and we will continue. I will continue to bring in those young people, not for token participation, but for meaningful experience, and not for us to mentor them and teach them only,
Right.
but to learn from them and to acknowledge and validate that they belong at the table. And so that for me is like, wow, that's huge. That makes me happy.
Yeah.
That makes me, at the end of the day, that makes me feel like I'm making a contribution, and that they're making a contribution in my life, which is huge, right?
Yeah.
So that's an aspect of it.
Totally.
Within the frameworks of what's happening, right, with doom and gloom, the many people who are dying and the struggles with all of that, there's always something about young people. You know what I do when I enter into parties and stuff like that? I look around, see where there's kids,
Sure.
and I sit around them.
Love that. I love that.
Because
Me
they're
too,
not,
honestly.
they're not worried about what I'm wearing or what I'm not wearing or what I'm saying. They're you know, I'm an uncle to many kids in my family,
Yeah.
so they call me Tio, and so that means uncle.
Yeah.
And so they're happy that Tio gets to play around with them on the floor and jumps around and right, all of that goofy stuff.
Yeah.
That rejuvenates me. And so I
Absolutely.
think about young people in that way.
Yeah, yeah.
The gift that they give me, right? And so I always smile when I'm in their presence. So that's one thing.
Yeah, yeah. Being an uncle is a fairly new uncle, but it is one of the great joys in life, isn't it? It's just
Yes, it
incredible.
is. Yes, it is.
Yeah,
For
and
sure.
so we always end our podcast with this one question. For our listeners at home, what's one piece of advice you have?
Be good to yourself. Begins with that. Be good to yourself. I think that many of us are so hard on ourselves. We say, "Oh, I have this voice," but it's our voice.
Yeah.
And that those voices, both good, bad, indifferent, were developed as a result of the experiences that we have had.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we are good to ourselves, then we can attend to those voices.
Yeah.
Internal and external voices that speak to us. And so what do I mean by being good to ourselves? If you identify as a person in recovery, engage with your recovery pathway. Engage with the people who care for you. Engage with that. If you are a person that's seeking to pursue whatever that is, an academic degree, a certification, a licensure. In Spanish, we say, I learned, pégate el palo que da sombra, which means that get near the tree that provides shade. And so I would say to people who are listening to this, come in contact, get close to people who are going to be supportive to you.
Yeah.
And move away quickly and briskly from the people who are not.
Yeah.
And we can tell right away who those people are for the most part, right? But to be good to myself means that I take care of myself spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, physically, and that I do things in all of those areas that are going to keep me healthy to be there for other people. And then recreate familia. Some people say, well, I don't have family. Well, we're family.
Yeah.
We create and recreate family and get closer to that. Again, be good to yourself. That's something that has been beneficial to me in this process.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Anair, it's been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Well, gracias a ti. Thank you. And thank you to all the listeners and people who are doing great work out there to humanize our folks, to treat people with dignity and respect. Thank you.
thanks for listening to Recovery Stories Have Power. You can listen to all of our episodes at pod.facesandvoicesofrecovery.org. And a big thank you to Dr. Hernandez. We've got 2 more video episodes coming at you soon throughout the month of July, so stay tuned. We release new episodes twice a month, once in the middle, once at the end, always on a Thursday. Produced and engineered by me, Oliver Books. Video technical support and website by Chris Aram. Our opening and closing theme is Come On Home by our friend Chris Tate, and shout out to the good folks at his RCO, Passenger Recovery. Comments or questions, send us an email at podcast@facesandvoicesofrecovery.org. Don't forget to rate and subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform, and thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.